Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lit Chick on a Mighty Blaze. I'm Jenna Paone, and I'm so excited to welcome the fabulous Elyssa Friedland back to the show to talk about her new book, The Most Likely Club. Hi, Elyssa. How are you today?
I am great. How are you?
I'm doing so well, and I absolutely loved your book. This is the perfect back to school read. Perfect September book club book. Like, this is a really fun way to kick off the fall. Totally gets you back. I always love those like Gilmore Girls like vibes in the fall. And this is like totally feeding into my back to school, like, desire. I wish I could go back to school sometimes, although maybe not so much
If
others.
only Luke's was real and we could take this and have coffee and read this book at Luke's, it would be
Exactly. It'd be perfect. So I'm going to give everyone a little background on Elyssa and the book, and then we will dive into some questions. And feel free, as always, to put some your questions and comments in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many as we can at the end. Thanks so much for joining us. Elyssa Friedland is the author of 5 novels, including Last Summer at the Golden Hotel, The Floating Feldmans, and her latest release, The Most Likely Club, along with a forthcoming picture book, The Museum of Lost Teeth, which will be published in February 2023. And I can't wait to talk about that too. That sounds so fun. She attended Yale University, where she served as managing editor of the Yale Daily News, just like Miss Rory Gilmore. And is a graduate of Columbia Law School. She worked as an associate at a major firm before turning to writing full time. She teaches an undergraduate course at Yale called Contemporary Novel Writing. Her work has been published in the Washington Post, McSweeney's, Lit Hub, Pop Sugar, Real Simple, Bustle, Modern Bride, New York Magazine, Columbia Journalism Review, CBS Market Watch, Yale Alumni Magazine, and more. Elyssa resides in New York City with her husband, 3 children, and puppy. The Most Likely Club is a Good Morning America buzz pick. Pure Wow says it's perfect for fans of Emily Henry and Gail Honeyman. The Most Likely Club is a celebration of embracing all the ways your life derails and the friends who help you along the way. Women's World calls it a hilarious feel-good saga. Pop Sugar says a high school reunion sparks new life for a group of best friends in Elyssa Friedland's winning novel, The Most Likely Club. Through their triumphs and failures, the group cherishes the bond of their friendship and honors their childhood selves in this hilarious and heartwarming tale. And Publishers Weekly says, in the delightful latest from Friedland, 4 women celebrate their 25th high school reunion. Friedland keeps up a steady stream of clever lines to convey the women's mix of excitement and dread over the big event. Overall, this strikes a fine balance between lighthearted and serious. Elyssa, welcome, and thanks so much again for being here.
Thank you. And thank you for reading that really long introduction. I'm
I
blushing.
I always like to like really sing people's praises because I feel like we just cannot hear it enough. Like I feel like if you're an author, you cannot hear the good stuff enough because you spend so much of your time alone by yourself at your computer, probably berating yourself. And like I think we should all hear the praise more and more and more.
Yes,
And that's what we're
I
here to
agree. And that's
do.
really very good point. That's
Yeah,
awesome that you brought that up.
it's really hard. Like,
And
and
we
you
focus on the negatives more, even besides berating ourselves, like a negative review sticks with
totally.
us more than like 5 positive reviews, I think. So
And that's so at the forefront of this book, like this idea of women and the expectations and, all of the ways that kind of life beats us down and how do you sort of like crawl your way back into, finding meaning and purpose and joy in your life. In maybe a different way than you thought. It's so great. Can you tell everyone at home a little more about the book and what inspired you to write it?
Sure. So, as Jenna said, this is my 5th baby, my 5th novel, and it's the story of 4 women who were best friends in high school. They graduated in 1997. So, for those of us that missed the 90s, there is a chock full of 90s nostalgia in the book. But the book is set mostly in the present time, this exact moment where the women are approaching their 25th high school reunion. And 3 of the 4 of this group of friends makes their way back to campus for the reunion. And it's full of all the angst you would expect. And a lot of their teenage feelings and memories come flooding back to them. And some surprising things happen at the reunion that leads them to pull out their yearbook, study, the old pictures, and they stumble upon their high school superlatives. I don't know if everyone's high school had that. Mine certainly did, although I didn't have a very exciting superlative. But, they see, most likely to be president, most
Yep.
likely to cure cancer. And of course, superlatives are superlatives. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not sure anyone really thinks they're going to single-handedly cure cancer, but it definitely represents a time where I think you feel a lot of teenage angst when you're that age, but you also feel a lot of optimism, like so
Mhm.
much of life is still ahead of you, that a lot of things seem possible at 17 that don't seem possible when you're in your 40s, because real life intervened, and you see that, like, having it all and achieving everything that you think you deserve to achieve is not, quite so easy. And not only does life get hard, and achieving things that we once wanted to achieve is more difficult, I think another interesting thing that the book explores is what we wanted to achieve at 17 evolves. And
Yes.
so there are some thwarted ambitions because real life intervenes, but there's also like a reevaluation as you're older and more mature, that the things you wanted when you were 17 and you were so sure you wanted
Mhm.
look very different than the things you want at 43, which is how old these women are. And so the book alternates chapters between the four women, and they are really close friends, but of course they have their struggles and their friendships too. I like to think it's a very honest portrayal of friendship, which is
Mhm.
like, you rely on your friends, you need your friends, but you also have moments where you're irritated with your friends,
Yeah.
and or maybe jealous of your friends. And that
Yes.
doesn't mean that it's not a genuine friendship. I think that means it's a real friendship.
It
So
actually that it did feel very real to me. Like, that
thank
felt like
you.
the text chains felt like my friends' text
No,
chains,
I actually, I stupidly have read some of the reviews, and a couple of people have commented like the women weren't always there for each other. And I thought, well, yeah, because sometimes they put themselves first, and sometimes they didn't have the purest of intentions at every moment. I mean, they don't like backstab each other or anything like that, but there are moments of like, you know what, everything always goes smoothly for her. Like, you know, like
Yeah,
now
normal, like, yeah,
like to
it's
me
normal
that's
to look at the from the outside and think, "Oh, they have an easier time," or like, "Their
yes,
life's going great." Even with our best friends, sometimes we don't realize the depth of, like, maybe a problem that they're dealing with that maybe they don't wanna talk about it fully, or
100%. They
your
keep things
best
from each other also. And I also think there are a few cases in the book it comes up where they a friend senses a problem and sees a problem that another friend is having, but they don't feel comfortable saying anything. It's almost like the classic like what if example, like you walk into a restaurant and you see your friend's husband out with another woman. Well, that's not great. Do you want to tell? Like, for all you know, your friend knows and
Yeah,
has chosen to keep that private, has
yeah,
chosen to like look the other way, or your friend's at a really fragile place and this would be the thing to like, tip her over, and you decide not to tell,
yeah.
and it's like it's complicated. And I
Mhm.
wanted to just be honest about how complicated friendship is.
I think the book is very honest, and I wanna talk about that in a little bit. It's honest, but also hopeful, and I really appreciate both sides, and we're gonna talk about that a little bit later. But first, so this year is my 20th high school reunion, which is fun, and I was saying I have my superlative, here on my yearbook. I was, most likely to be famous, which did not happen. Surprise, surprise.
Oh,
Shock,
you're
shock.
you're we're people are
I'm
watching you
very
right now.
famous to, like, 4 people, but not at all. But you know what? I tried. I did I did the good fight. Had a different path too, and I started off as a ballet dancer and an actor and a singer, and moved, and I was in the music industry for years, and now I am writing a book and doing this, which is so fun. And I'm somebody who has, like, had multiple career and, like, evolutions over time. I think that's one of the things, like, I'm not the same person I was when I was 20 or 17 or 25 or 30 anymore. My desires change. You clearly have had like an extremely illustrious academic and before corporate law career, and then you transitioned to writing novels. So I'm super interested in where the idea for this book came from. Did you draw from your personal experience of sort of going through these transitions of maybe your identity and who you thought you were going to be? Did you see it in friends? Tell me a little more about, or did you have, as our friend Sharon said here, did you have a recent high school reunion that kind of inspired you to write this? I'd love to hear more about where you came to write this book.
I would love to answer all of those. I have my 25th coming up next year, and I hope to go. I grew up in New Jersey and now I live in New York, so it should be very, doable to make it to that. But I would say I was always a really hard worker and I took school really seriously. And then I went to college and I did a lot of writing in college. And then I think I wouldn't say novelist, but I would say like I wanted to work for a magazine. I would like to be a features writer in a magazine, but it definitely doesn't like pay very well. And those jobs are really few and far between and really hard to come by. Like I would have loved to write features for Vogue, but Vogue wasn't like showing up on the Yale campus, like looking for writers. They weren't actively recruiting the way like the investment banks and the consulting firms were coming to campus, and they were like throwing dinners and inviting anybody. And there was room for
starting salary and your bonus and like
and
this.
You're going to get paid like a 6-figure salary when you graduate. So I kind of explored that a little bit, and I certainly took the free dinners at school. And then I was like, I don't think that's for me. I interviewed not that well. Like I just didn't have like the math skills that they were looking for. I didn't feel like it was the right fit for me. And I've always been like much more creative. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to apply to law school. It was like a way to stay in school for 3 more years. And I do love being a student. I applied to law school, and then I went to work after I graduated, I went to work as a corporate attorney, and I only lasted 3 years, and I really didn't enjoy it. Like it wasn't terrible. And I did like my coworkers, and I liked the paycheck, and I liked the firm actually. Like it was a very nice place, but I didn't have any passion in the work.
Yeah.
And I think I eventually quit and decided, to make a go at trying to write a novel. I think the way that life experience trickles into this book in particular is that it was hard for me as like such a type A go-getter to acknowledge that I had a misstep. Like up until then, every single thing like I had been doing built on itself, So it was like study really hard in high school and get, some interesting summer internships so that I could get into the best college I could get into, at Yale, choose, a major that is, the kind of major where I think I'll have the high, my best chances at a high GPA, and will still enable me to work on the Yale Daily News and do the newspaper. And I was like doing the right clubs and building my resume, and like everything was like leading to the next. And then all those things helped me get into a really top law school. And I went to Columbia, and then I worked hard at Columbia so I could get hired by a great firm. And then I got hired by a great firm. And then I just wasn't happy in the firm. And I was there 3 years and 3 years of law school. And it was the first time. At this point, I'm only like 30. And I've realized that like 6 years I'm 30. So it's a really large percentage of 30, like 6 of 30 years were probably a mistake. Like,
don't worry, I have like twice that were a mistake for me.
And I think that's really common.
Yeah.
And it was just a really like weird moment for me where I was like, for the first time, like, it's not like I wasted time and did a 1-month internship that got me nowhere. It was like 6 years, and law school was also really expensive. So it was like expensive to go, and I took out loans, and I worked really hard there because it's really, really hard. So it was like staying up late, to do well in law school. I asked my parents to pay for half of it, which they did. I had some loans, like it was, to pay off. And I was like, but I don't like being a lawyer. And it was the first time where I was like, yikes, like I made a choice that was like a misdirection. Now, in some crazy way, maybe this is the optimist in me that always like wants to find the like silver lining, I now teach this class, as you mentioned. I teach a class at Yale once a week called contemporary novel writing, which I in the undergrad, which I absolutely adore. And in order to be eligible to teach, they require an advanced degree. And so having that law degree, even though, to be totally frank, the law degree does not, I don't think that makes me a better
Yeah.
teacher. I don't think it makes me necessarily a better novelist,
Yep.
but it's a requirement that, I have an advanced degree to be able to teach. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe that it was a 6-year misdirection, but like now I'm able to teach because of it. And so there is some, connection there. But I like to explore that in this book a lot because these characters have some wasted time feels like a too negative and like
Yeah.
what's really wasted? Like in law school, I also made some great friends that I'm still in touch with. So like, can I really say it was wasted if I have lifelong friends from it? I'm sure my brain developed like better analytical
Yeah.
skills, from being
Right.
in school and the law firm. It really showed me like working your ass off and having a boss for the first time. Like there were valuable lessons, but it was less like on the path to where I ended up. But in this book, these women also like they think they're going one place, life intervenes.
Yep.
They are waking up at the same age I am now and thinking like life has turned out really differently than I expected. When I was 17, this isn't quite where I thought I would be. And then there's a character, Priya, probably one I identify for many reasons, probably the most. Like she's like, I actually have achieved basically everything I set out to do, but I'm not that happy. Like, this
Yeah.
isn't like I have everything on paper. And yet at the end of the day, I'm like, wiped beyond belief. I'm resentful of the people around me. There is not a split second left for me to breathe and find any peace for myself. So like her high school superlative, she's a doctor and her high school superlative was most likely to cure cancer. And she doesn't cure cancer, but she, goes into orthopedics, which is what she wanted. She's a really successful doctor. She's a great patient load. She's really well regarded at the hospital. She's married to a successful doctor like herself. They have 3 beautiful children. And yet she's like really unsatisfied because she is just at the end of the day, when she has a moment, she thinks to herself as she has a drive by herself, like, what would she do with her free time? She doesn't even know what she likes. Like, because the idea is like, if she had an hour to herself, what would she choose to do? Well, besides like napping, she's like, I don't know. I haven't had the luxury of a hobby. I have absolutely no idea what would make me happy.
And that speaks to, so one thing I really appreciate about this book, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you and I have, like, we actually kind of have similar backgrounds in the sense of like type A, super high achiever, like, and I feel like so many women I know, and one thing I appreciate about this book is all the women in this book are exceptional. And I know so many exceptional women who are killing it. They're out there, they've got great jobs, they've got great families. They're ticking the boxes, they're moving through. And I feel like and I'm a little bit younger, but like I feel like broadly our generational, like we were the first generations to like have, I guess, really substantially more opportunities than the previous ones. But with that, the expectations went so high that like I'm not sure if there's a way that I could ever be proud, like unless I did every single thing. And and it would just be like, well, that's what you're supposed to do. And by the way, could you also do this? Because now as like I'm a mom like you, like you know it is, and my husband is wonderful and a great equal partner, and like, and it's still so hard because of the societal expectations. And I think this book does a really good job of honestly discussing what so many women are going through and what the past few years in the pandemic and everything have like brought to the forefront. We are getting it from all angles. This book really talks about, you know, the misogyny, the double
I'm
standards.
I'm I'm writing down about the pandemic because I do think that I wrote a lot of this during the pandemic, and I think that did bring a lot of these issues. Like, my husband, I think, saw for the first time in his life, like, all the stuff I do during the day that he didn't even realize, but I was like, no one magically signed up our son for baseball. Like,
Right.
that doesn't like, I didn't, like, put fairy dust, on the computer and he was signed up. No, I had to, like, send his vaccine card 18 times through and change the class 100 times when his other coach had to change, and, like, yeah, there's a lot
Yeah.
that goes into these things that seem to just magically happen.
And I felt that in this book. Like, I was like, this is a book for women who have gone through this pandemic. And like, we are trying to come out the other side. And we are like exhausted. And we are trying to like kind of return to normal life and like, and strike a new equilibrium because the old one isn't working. And I want to know more about your experience writing this because your last book, too, um, last summer at the Golden Hotel, it was interesting because it came out during the pandemic where so many of us were like crammed in with our families. And it was this family novel about the family all having to be back in the same space again. And this one is very much about these issues that so many women were experiencing during these past few years. So I'm interested, what is your like timeline for writing? How much were your personal circumstances influencing that writing? Did you already know you were going to write this book next before the pandemic, or did this idea come to you in the pandemic as a way to kind of work through some of these and discuss some of these issues? It's so timely. And I think that's a really difficult thing to strike while the iron is hot as an author, to like write something that is in sort of the zeitgeist of discourse without making it seem, overly like trite or anything. Like, this feels very natural and feels like just a natural discussion, and it makes total sense that these women would be considering these things at this point in their lives. Talk to me about your process and how you choose ideas, how you choose what to work on next, and how much you either do or do not let the outside world kind of in your creative process.
So I would say I had the idea for this book before the pandemic, very loosely, and it was really inspired by something that happened way before COVID, which is like a funny story that my mom told me when I was growing up a few times, and then has told, and I probably don't even remember her telling it to me, although I know she did. It's more, I remember it from her telling my kids. So my kids would come home from school upset, nor, like regular kids. So and so wasn't nice to me. So and so didn't move over for me to have a place to sit at lunch, blah, blah, blah. Or like I was made fun of because I got 100 on a test and I'm a suck up or this or that, various things that, someone wasn't nice and they weren't feeling great or they feel excluded, like all the usual childhood growing pains that we all know so well. And my mom has this story that she trots out at this point, not anymore because we've all heard it so many times, about being in high school. She was like nerdy, very smart. At the time, like, it was more common to skip grades, and so she was skipped ahead 2 grades in, New York City public school, so she's, like, a senior at 16, and, like, so that didn't help much in terms of, like, fitting in, and so she was, like, on the nerdier end and really great student, and she, there was, like, the heartthrob in the class. This is a large public school, so there's, like, number of popular kids, and one guy in particular, very good looking, very popular, like I think he maybe was even voted like most likely to succeed. And he was really someone who just had nothing to do with my mom until, like, he wanted to study for the math test together, and he approaches her, and she was really pretty. I've seen a lot of pictures, but not like cool. And he approaches her and he wants to study for the test. And she's so excited. And meanwhile, like, she's actually like a teacher's helper,
Yep.
because she was like such a goody goody, and she gets like, he basically convinces her to like filch a copy of the test and like give it to him in advance, and so she does this, not like her. And after that happened, like, he never spoke to her again, like, goodbye,
Yeah.
goodbye, Charlie, and she was like, of course, feeling devastated and used and this and that. Well, fast forward, she gets married really young. She goes to college, meets my father at a wedding. They're really young. They get married at like 21 or 22. And my dad gets like a good job out of college. He's working at a large accounting firm. And so he's doing well. My mom's teaching. They have 2 incomes. Like, they're thriving, they're not rich. They're thriving, though, for being 23 years old. And they are able to buy a home at a really young age. And so they're super proud, and they buy this house. And lo and behold, like, they're there for 6 months. The windows are disgusting and caked in mud and this from the storms and the weather and everything. So, my mom's like, I gotta get the windows clean, calls the window washer. And she's home, and the window washer arrives to clean the windows. And who shows up to clean the windows? None other than the guy who, from high school, who she stole the test from. And it was like that story. And not that there was anything wrong with being a window washer, but, it does feel pretty good that this guy who, like, ditched her is that now there, and she's like, "Oh, you missed a spot."
Oh,
You know?
yeah. Oh,
So,
yeah.
of
We all
course,
have that, right? That
yeah, and
person.
I don't have to, like, articulate the lessons learned there, like, it's pretty obvious, and so that's a story that always, like, stuck with me when she would tell my kids, and that kind of was like, wow, like, you don't really know how people are gonna turn out, and my daughter the other day was, like, coming in, and she was really upset about something that happened in school, and the girls weren't being nice, and I'm trying to explain to her that, like, if they're not nice, like, I guarantee it's their own issue, like,
Yeah.
meanness comes often from insecurity. Like they're either feel jealous of you or they're just going through a rough time in their own lives. And so that this is how that's manifesting, or they're having just insecurity. And it's like, doesn't really matter what I say, she's still going to be upset. And that was also something I wanted to explore. Like, you want to protect your kids. You see them going through the same things that we went through. And I have this a lot with the character Melissa, who has not only has a teenage daughter, but has a teenage daughter that is attending the same school that Melissa and her friends went to. And so it's like she had that same experience in the same hallway. Maybe Melissa's experience happened by someone stuffed a note in her locker, and her daughter's experience is happening on Snapchat. So
Yeah.
sure, like the medium is different, but the
Yeah.
script is the same and the
Mhm.
theme is the same. And
Mhm.
Melissa can't protect her daughter. Like
Yeah.
her daughter is rejecting that her mother understands. And I think that that's like there's really kind of I almost think it's like sort of no hope. Like you can be there as a mother and you can try to tell your child, you can be empathetic. But when you say like I've been there, I know this, like there's definitely a part of the child that's like you don't get it now though. Like I think things are different now. You don't understand. And in the moment it feels cataclysmic. Like you have a bad day in middle school or high school, like it feels like the world is ending. And it takes to getting to like this age to be like, wow, I thought the world was ending, and now I can barely remember what even happened. And so that's like there was just so much to explore. We have 4 women in my book who all have taken very different career paths, and their family lives have turned out totally differently, and they were really different in high school, and you just mine that for issues and themes. There was like this book could have been like, 1,800 pages.
I know, and I kind of wish like it's and let's talk about the women themselves, because like your other work, I would have read it at 1,800 pages, by the way. I'm all for that. Um, I'm like the one reader that I'm like, yeah, give me like the bigger the better. But I also do want to talk about your ability to be concise and very very deep at the same time. However, let's talk about the women first. So, like your other work, this is rotating points of view between Melissa, Priya, Tara, and then at one point, Suki, the other member of the group, her voice comes in as well. Um, what is it about writing? Like, clearly, this format appeals to you. So,
Yeah.
what is it about it that really works for you as a writer? Did you ever try like single narrator, or were you just from the beginning like, I'm going to write multiple points of view? Like, that's my jam. How did that kind of come about?
My first novel was a single point of view, and I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was good for a first novel because it's like it's a little well, I think it's easier. Just really, really focus on that one person, that one person's thoughts. It's a little easier to keep track of the timeline and what's happening, with the passage of time and where the person is and how they've been feeling. If you're just consistently moving through one person's day-to-day life, or even if you jump ahead, but you're still with that one person. But then, I don't know, I guess like my appetite grew and I wanted to challenge myself as a writer. And so my second book had 2 narrators, and then my third had a ton, my fourth had a ton, this one has 4. Like I just started to fall in love with multiple narrators. I think it's like, first of all, it's really more fun to write because I get to bounce around more, and I get less sick of the material because you have to edit. Like a reader reads the book once. Like I have to read it like 700 times. I'm like writing it and editing and writing and editing. And like, then I'm just constantly reading it over. And it's like, it's more interesting for me, especially with the writing it. I can bounce back and forth between people. I also think it increases the chances that readers will find someone to identify with. And so when I have different personalities, different types of people in my books, like I think there's more of a chance of a reader to be able to see themselves in one of the characters. And I also think it presents it's a good reminder of like seeing things from other people's perspectives, and a reminder that like a conversation takes place between two people. And if we're only inside one of their heads, then we only really see their point of view. And I think it can be really fun as a writer to share the same scene. I don't, retell the exact same scene over, but it might be reflected, like have a scene take place between two characters, and we are in the head of one of the characters, and we know what her interpretation was of that conversation. But then we get to jump, ahead to the next chapter, and we might have the person she was in conversation with thinking back to that conversation, and we see the misinterpretation that happened. Like one, it happens all the time in real life, and you get a glimpse into like, I'm sure, everyone can relate to like, you walk down the street, run into someone, they aren't that friendly. Okay. And you're annoyed and you're like, what did I do? And you might worry, like, are they mad at me? What did I do? Did something happen? Did I say something about them that got back? Like you just get crazy. And then like 6 months later, you might find out like they had just found out that mother was sick. They had just gotten a call from school that their son was in the principal's office again. And like running into you and having to be normal was like more than they could produce in that moment, And
I agree. I mean,
I'm a really valuable lesson. And I tell that to my kids all the time. I even have to remind my mother about that. I'm like, you don't know what's happening. And I think I'm someone who does always think of that because I'm a writer. Like I do this like in a fictional world all the time. So it's really easy. Like I'm pretty good at reminding myself, like, there is a chance I did something wrong. There's a chance it's about me, but there is also a large chance that that whole person has a whole other life that has nothing to do with me. And they don't always have to be in a good mood. And they weren't friendly for a multitude of reasons. Maybe they had to get to the toilet, honestly, and they didn't have time to chat. Like there are just 1,000 reasons. And so that multiple point of view really opens that door.
And I do think being a writer makes you more understanding and empathetic and being, and a reader as well. Like having, I think it does. And on that note, and I'm a big multiple point of view person myself. I mean, I will say I'm trying, like I'm writing my first novel right now and it's multiple point of view. And I'm like, why didn't I just pick one? Because this is really hard. And it's like, I'm like, I already don't know how to write a novel. And now I'm trying to write 4 novels in one. And that's really what it is. It's multiple novels.
You can call me offline and I'll walk you through it.
I will. Well, I think what you did is interesting with your points of view, because I actually am doing the same thing in my book. And it's something that some people have an issue with and some people don't. Some people are like, this is fine. And some people are like, this is bugging me. Why did you do this? And it's to introduce a character who has been off stage that you have not heard from as a point of view character. 3/4 of the way through the book, and also you change the tense, and you change you change from third person to first person, and it works for me a lot. Obviously, I'm clearly like making the same choice. So I'm like, validate my choice here. But I'm interested to know, this is something I've noticed in your other work too, that you do sometimes introduce somebody new, or maybe don't weight characters totally symmetrically. And some people are really focused on symmetry, and some are more like, no, whatever, like whoever is the best voice for the story at the time should be the person that picks up the narrative. I'd love to hear your thoughts behind that choice. And kind of your view of it.
So it comes really from the novels that I've read and admired. And it was like reading, I'm a big reader, and maybe it was like specifically like reading Jennifer Egan and A Visit from the Goon Squad, which is one of my favorite novels. And there are others too, where with multiple point of view that don't follow like an exact rhythm. And I fell in love with that. And it made me feel like the book was less formatic, I guess.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's that you have